She thought humans were easy to control. The first time Commander Alex saw a human, she laughed. She had seen files, read reports, listened to military stories, but none of them impressed her. Humans were described as clever, yes, but weak. Emotional. Too soft to survive real power. So when her father, the High Chancellor of the Zeran Empire, assigned her a human military officer to serve on her command ship, she scoffed. "A human?" she said aloud in front of her crew. "That's all they send me?" The guards around her laughed with forced smiles. No one dared correct her, not even when the human walked in. Captain Dax Mercer stood tall in his dark uniform. He had short, brown hair, sharp blue eyes, and a calm expression that didn't change when Alex stared at him like he was a joke. "You're the human?" she said, circling him. Dax simply nodded. "Captain Dax Mercer, reporting for duty." She tilted her head, amused. "You don't kneel?" "I don't kneel for titles," he said. "Only for fallen soldiers." The room went quiet. Her guards looked at each other, shocked. Alex's smile faded just a little, but she hid it well. "Very bold," she said, walking past him. "I've seen males executed for less." "I'm not here to entertain you," Dax said calmly. "I'm here to serve the mission." That was the second surprise. He didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't show fear. Alex was used to control. She was royalty. Her word was law. Even her officers bowed before her without question. But this human, he stood like a wall, unmoved, solid, different. Later, that day, she tested him again. She walked into the control deck where Dax was reviewing supply logs. She dropped a ceremonial staff at his feet. "Clean it." Dax looked at the staff, then at her. He picked it up and gently placed it on the nearest table. "I don't polish symbols," he said. "I maintain systems." She raised an eyebrow. "You refuse my order?" "I refuse disrespect disguised as command." The crew around them froze. This human was either incredibly stupid or incredibly sure of himself. She leaned in, her voice low. "You do know who I am, don't you?" Dax nodded. "A soldier, like me. Nothing more." Alex blinked, for the first time in her life. She didn't know what to say. That night she called her father. "The human is difficult," she said. The Chancellor's voice came through the screen, deep and slow. "He was assigned for a reason." "I don't need a teacher," she snapped. "No," her father said. "You need someone who won't lie to you." The line went silent, and Alex felt something she hadn't felt in years. Doubt. The next day she gave him real work. Security checks, diplomatic scans, system reviews. He did them faster than expected, better than her elite officers, and with no complaints. But never once did he act like a servant. He offered advice, spoke directly, walked beside her, not behind. At first it annoyed her, then confused her, then something else. One afternoon she tried again. She ordered him to escort her into a royal meeting. "Walk 6 steps behind me," she said. Dax didn't move. "I'll walk beside you," he replied. "That way if someone attacks, I can take the hit first." Alex paused. She hadn't thought of that. She always expected fear. Not protection, not logic, not loyalty. Inside the meeting, several nobles looked at her in surprise. "You brought a human," one of them asked. "Dangerous choice," another whispered. But Dax simply stood there, calm, watchful. When a council member insulted Alex directly, Dax stepped forward. "Speak with honor," he said. "Or step down." The room went cold. The nobles stared. Alex stared, and for once, no one dared speak. After the meeting, she stopped him in the corridor. "Why did you speak for me?" she asked. "You were right," he said. "They were out of line. But you risked your rank." He nodded. "Respect isn't given. It's protected." She looked at him. Longer this time. Not as a tool, not as a joke, but as a man who saw her not as a title, but as a person. That night she stood alone in her private quarters. She looked out at the stars and whispered, "Maybe humans aren't so weak after all." He refused her orders and taught her a lesson instead. Commander Alex didn't sleep much after that meeting, not because of the nobles, not because of the mission, but because of the human. Captain Dax Mercer had only been on her ship for 5 days. And yet, in that short time, he had done something no one else ever had. He looked her in the eye and told her the truth. No flattery, no fear, just truth. It bothered her, it challenged her, and deep down, it impressed her. Still, Alex was no fool. She was bred for control, trained to command, born into leadership. So the next day she came up with a test, a public test. That morning the ship arrived at Station Virex 2, a floating trade hub known for its tricky politics. Alex was scheduled to speak with a local dignitary, Lady Rin, a sharp-tongued negotiator who loved to humiliate military officers. Perfect. She would bring Dax. She would give him impossible instructions, and he would fail. In the docking corridor, she turned to him. "You will not speak unless spoken to. Do not interrupt, do not correct me. You're here to stand, not speak. Clear?" Dax looked at her, calm as ever. Understood. But there was something in his eyes, something still uncontrolled. The meeting room was filled with cold light and even colder words. Lady Rin began her game immediately. "So, the great Alex arrives, late, with a pet human. How exotic." Alex smirked. He's well trained. Dax's jaw clenched, but he stayed silent. At first, Rin kept going. "You Velmarans love your power, but your empire is cracking. I can smell the desperation. Even your so-called command princess hides behind off-worlders now." Alex smiled tightly. "We brought strength, not weakness." Rin laughed. "Strength? Then why hasn't your escort said a word? Is he that obedient? Or just that useless?" That was when Dax spoke. One sentence, calm, precise, and deadly. "Useless men don't stand behind the strong. They bury them." The room fell silent. Rin's smile disappeared. She looked at Dax like he had slapped her. "You dare speak to me?" Dax didn't raise his voice, didn't flinch. He simply said, "You mock a soldier for standing still, but you've never fought anything worth moving for." Rin rose to her feet. Alex stood too, heart racing. This was it. He had disobeyed. He had spoken. He had embarrassed her. She would punish him. She would do nothing, because something had changed. Lady Rin didn't attack. She didn't shout. She simply stepped back and said, "Perhaps humans aren't so dull after all." Then she walked away. Meeting over. Outside in the corridor, Alex turned to Dax. Her eyes burned. "You defied my orders." "Yes," Dax said. "Why?" He looked at her, not as an officer, not as a royal, but as a person. "Because your enemy wasn't listening to you. She was watching how you let others speak for you." Alex stared at him. "You made me look weak." "No," Dax said. "I made her see you as someone who didn't need to speak to be respected." She crossed her arms. "You took control." He shook his head. "I gave it back." She didn't reply. Not right away. Because the truth hit harder than any insult. He didn't speak to shame her. He spoke to protect her. And the worst part? It worked. Later in her private quarters, she watched the meeting footage again. Rin's smug face. Dax's words. Her own silence. She clenched her fists. And then, she smiled. Just a little. The next morning, Dax reported for duty. He expected a cold stare, maybe even punishment. But Alex simply said, "Today we speak as equals." He raised an eyebrow. "Is that an order?" She smirked. "No, that's respect. You earned it." And just like that, she wasn't testing him anymore. She was learning from him. She tried to break him. But he broke her ego first. Commander Alex had never lost a game, not in combat simulations, not in politics, not even in subtle power games. Among her royal family, she was raised to lead, to dominate, to be untouchable. But lately, one human was making her feel exposed, Captain Dax Mercer, and it was beginning to bother her. He was calm, focused, quietly correct, and worst of all, he didn't argue to win. He spoke with purpose that made it harder to ignore him, or dismiss him as beneath her. So she decided to test him again, one last time, but not with orders, with a trap. It started with a diplomatic reception on planet Sorath, home to the wealthiest merchant guild in the Zirin sector. Every year, commanders from the Empire were invited to give a short public address. Alex was expected to speak. But this time, she had another idea. Right before they landed, she turned to Dax in the prep room and said, "You will speak today, not me." Dax looked up from his data pad. That wasn't the plan. Plans change, she said, smiling. I want them to hear from a human. I'm not trained for imperial speeches. You're smart, you'll improvise. He frowned. And if I say no? She stepped closer, eyes cool. Then I'll say you were afraid. She didn't say it with anger. She said it with challenge, a push. She expected him to either fold or fumble, but he didn't. Dax simply nodded. Then I'll speak. The reception hall was glowing with crystal lights and lined with nobles, traders, and ambassadors. Alex sat near the front, elegant, powerful, ready to watch the man who had unsettled her finally fail. She waited for him to panic, to freeze, to make a mistake. But Dax walked to the podium, calm as ever, and looked at the crowd like he belonged there. Then he spoke. My name is Captain Dax Mercer. I come from a species most of you see as simple, soft, unimpressive. The room stayed quiet. But I've served in 3 wars, across 7 systems. I've lost friends, carried bodies, and buried ideals I once believed in. He looked over at Alex for a moment, his voice still steady. And now I serve under Commander Alex of the Zirin Empire. She's sharp, unshakable, and a leader I've come to respect. Alex blinked. What? But respect, Dax continued, isn't about bloodlines or titles. It's not something you're born with. It's something you prove, over time, with action. He paused. In my culture, discipline isn't punishment. It's structure. It's earned trust. It's knowing where to stand when others run. He stepped back, hands behind his back. I'm proud to serve beside someone who understands that, even if she didn't know it yet. Silence. Then, applause. Real applause. Slow, rising, from nobles, from traitors, even from old commanders. Alex stared. She had set a trap, but he didn't fall. He turned it around and taught her a lesson instead. Later, on the shuttle back, she didn't speak for several minutes. Dax sat beside her, quiet. Finally, she broke the silence. You embarrassed me. He looked at her. No, I reminded you who you are. She turned, confused. And who is that? He met her eyes. Someone worth more than titles. That night, she stood alone in her chambers, looking in the mirror. The same armor, the same symbols, but something was different. She didn't feel smaller. She felt seen. She remembered how she used to laugh at humans, soft, emotional, undisciplined. But Dax, he was the most disciplined being she had ever met, not just with his body, but with his words, his mind, his power. He didn't control others. He controlled himself, and that was something her world had never taught her. The next morning she greeted him differently, not with commands, not with ego, but with something new. Respect. Captain Mercer, she said, walk beside me. He nodded. Always. And this time, it wasn't about rank. It was about growth. He took command, and she was forced to obey. The Zyran command vessel, Veritar, drifted through the dark edge of Sector K5, a quiet route known for pirate traffic. Commander Alex sat in her command chair, calm and proud as always. Her polished boots crossed, her gold-trimmed armor shining under the soft ceiling lights. Around her, elite officers monitored the ship's path. Everything seemed normal, until it wasn't. The warning came in sharp and sudden. Unidentified vessels. Approaching fast, 6 of them. Weapons hot, shields up. Alex stood immediately. Form defensive line, open standard channel, identify them now. No response, the officer replied. They're jamming us. That's when Captain Dax Mercer walked onto the bridge. One look at the blinking screens, the flickering threat indicators, and his posture changed. Calm turned to sharp focus. He walked beside her, his voice low but clear. Those aren't raiders. Those are professionals, and they're not here to rob us. Alex kept her chin high. We're not helpless. No, he said. But your crew's not ready. Not for this. Her jaw clenched. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting, he said, stepping forward. I'm taking command. The entire bridge went silent. Every officer turned. A human had just declared authority on a Zyran flagship. Unheard of. Unthinkable. Alex stared at him. Her pride screamed no. But something deeper. Something she'd tried to ignore. Whispered yes. Why? She asked softly. Dax didn't blink. Because your crew is trained for ceremony, I'm trained for survival. He turned to the helm. Evasive pattern Echo 2. Shut down main thrusters. Divert power to pulse shields. Drop a flare pod in 10 seconds. No one moved. Alex nodded once. Do it, she said. And they obeyed. The ship jolted as energy flared and panels darkened. The flare pod exploded behind them, blinding the sensors of the attackers. The bridge was lit only by red emergency lights. Dax's voice cut through the tension. Now rotate 67 degrees. Now, bring up tactical missiles, but don't fire. Why not? The weapons officer asked. Because they want us to panic, Dax said. We won't. We wait. Then hit the engine. Cores when they close in. Alex stood behind him now, silent, focused, watching every move. She had never seen anyone command like this. Not with shouting, not with fear, but with complete control. When the enemy ships closed in, Dax gave the order. Now. Fire 2. Spin. Fire. Again. And cut all engines. The Veritar spun like a ghost, vanishing into the dark just as 2 of the enemy ships exploded in bright bursts of flame. The rest scattered. And just like that, it was over. The bridge slowly lit up again. Officers breathed. Some stared at Dax like he was a legend. Others looked at Alex, unsure what she would say. She stepped forward. Everyone waited. She looked at Dax and said, Captain Mercer, this ship owes you its life. He looked back. No. It owes you for letting me act. In the silence that followed, something shifted, something permanent. No one saw her as weak. No one saw him as lesser. They saw something else. Balance. That night, Alex found him alone in the observation deck. Stars stretched forever in the distance. She stood beside him, arms folded. I've never given control to anyone before, she said. I didn't take it to insult you. I know, she said. You took it because I needed someone stronger in that moment. She looked at him. And you were. He didn't smile, he didn't boast. He simply said, discipline means knowing when to lead and when to follow. Alex nodded slowly, and for the first time the word follow didn't sound like weakness. It sounded like trust. And in that quiet corner of the ship, as the stars watched silently, the commander and the human stood together, no longer fighting for power, but preparing for what came next. Together, she crossed the line, and he made her earn redemption. Commander Alex wasn't used to doubt. She had learned to bury it, hide it behind perfect posture, flawless orders, and cold confidence. But since Dax Mercer had arrived, cracks had begun to show, and now one of those cracks was about to break wide open. The Veritar was en route to a diplomatic outpost near the contested zone of Rift Space. The area was unstable, known for sudden raids and deep corruption. Orders were to avoid contact, stay invisible, and wait for the main fleet. But Alex was tired of waiting. She wanted to prove she still had control, and so she disobeyed. She called for a silent detour without alerting Dax. Not because she didn't trust him, but because she didn't want to need him. She ordered a stealth drop team to scan the abandoned station in Rift Space. It looked dead on radar. Empty. Harmless. But it wasn't. 3 minutes after landing, the squad was ambushed. Traps, mines, automated defense drones from a forgotten war, a biovirus release in the airlock. 2 soldiers died instantly. 3 were critically injured. The ship had to intervene, revealing its position, and the only reason the rest made it out was because Dax took over. Again. Back on the ship, the medbay was full. Dax stood over the wounded, jaw tight. He didn't yell, didn't curse. But when Alex walked in, he didn't look at her, not even once. "Say it," she said. He didn't answer. "You want to tell me I was wrong, that I acted on pride, that I let my need for control override the mission?" Still silence, she stepped closer. "I made a mistake." He turned then. Slowly. Sharply. "No," he said coldly. "You made a choice. A mistake is when something goes wrong. A choice is when you knew better and did it anyway." His voice was quiet, but it felt like a thunderstrike. She didn't flinch, but her chest tightened. "Then say it. Demote me. File a report. Have me removed." He shook his head. "I'm not here to break your rank." He stepped past her. "But if you want respect, again, you'll earn it." The next 2 days, Alex said nothing. She woke early, trained longer, took the least comfortable quarters. She personally cleaned the blood-stained gear from the drop squad and stood beside the medbay each morning, checking on survivors. Not as a commander, but as someone trying to rebuild what she broke. Dax watched. He didn't say much, but he saw everything, the way she carried herself differently, the way she listened more, the way her pride bent, not to weakness, but to growth. On the 4th day, she walked into the war room. Dax was reviewing recon data. She stood in front of him. No armor, no title in her tone, just her voice. Clear, honest. "I disobeyed the mission." He looked at her. "I know. I cost lives. Yes. I don't ask for forgiveness." "Good," he said. "Because you don't deserve it yet." She nodded. "But I do ask for one thing." "What?" "Let me earn your trust again." He stared at her, then slowly handed her a data tablet. "Plan the next mission." She blinked. "You're letting me lead again?" "No," he said. "I'm watching how you lead yourself." And that night in her quiet quarters, Alex looked at her reflection. Same face, same eyes. But something was different. For the first time, she didn't see someone born to command. She saw someone willing to become worthy of it. And deep in her heart, she whispered the words she'd never dared say aloud. "He didn't punish me. He taught me to punish myself." And that changed me, more than anything else could. She finally understood what he was teaching. Her Commander Alex no longer walked with noise. There was no stomp in her step, no exaggerated shine to her armor, no gaze that shouted, "Look at me." She moved like a shadow now, silent, focused, clear, and it wasn't because she was broken. It was because she was becoming something better. The crew noticed. She checked systems before officers did. She waited for reports instead of demanding them. She greeted wounded soldiers by name. When she made orders, she explained the why, not to defend her power but to share her purpose. And somehow that made her stronger. More. Human Dax Mercer didn't say much about it. He didn't need to, because every time she showed control, restraint, or compassion, He simply nodded, and in that small nod, Alex found the only approval that mattered. One day, in the training chamber, she watched two cadets spar. One moved like fire, fast, flashy, aggressive. The other moved like Dax, calm, predictable, but unshakable. The first one lunged too soon, slipped, lost. Alex turned to Dax. "You see that?" He nodded. "Everyone wants to strike first, but the strongest one knows when not to." She stared at him. "You've been training me since the day you arrived, haven't you?" He raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't aware you needed training." That night, Alex sat alone in the command garden, a quiet space filled with glowing blue flowers and soft artificial wind. She watched the stars flicker above. So many ships, so many planets, so many leaders, who had no idea what leadership really was. Footsteps broke the silence. Dax walked in and sat beside her. For a moment they didn't speak, just silence. Good silence. Then she said it. "I used to think discipline was about fear, control, obedience." He nodded. "That's what most believe. But you never raised your voice, never punished, never shamed me." "No. Yet I changed more because of you than anyone else." She looked at him. "Why?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Because discipline isn't about control. It's about clarity. About knowing who you are, especially when no one is watching." She breathed slowly, then whispered, "So when I misbehaved, you weren't weak," he said. "You were lost." She blinked. "And now?" He smiled, softly. "Now, you've found your compass." The next day, the Veritar was called to mediate a dispute between two outer ring colonies, a task usually reserved for royal diplomats. The command sent others, but the colonies refused to deal with anyone except Commander Alex and the human. As they stepped into the meeting hall, the crowd fell silent. Alex walked in first, not proud but ready. Dax beside her, not behind, not in front. Equal. The council chief looked up. "So, you're the one they said was too arrogant to change." Alex nodded. "They weren't wrong." The chief raised an eyebrow. "And now?" She glanced at Dax, then back at the council. "Now I listen first." After hours of tension, disagreement, and near threats, the colonies signed peace, not because they feared Alex, but because they trusted her. Not her name, not her title, her growth. On the way back, Alex looked out the window. "You know what I realized today?" she said. Dax glanced at her. "That I'm still learning." He smiled faintly. "Good. That means you're still dangerous." She turned to him, serious now. "What about you, Dax? What about me? Do you ever get tired of being the one who teaches everyone else?" He paused, then said softly, "Sometimes, but then I meet someone who actually learns." Alex smiled. "That your way of saying thank you?" "No," he said. "That's my way of saying, I see you." And in that moment, for the first time in her entire life, Alex felt not like a commander, not like a royal, not like someone trying to be better. She felt like herself, and that was enough. Now she's feared across the galaxy, and he's the only one she obeys. The name Alex was now spoken in rooms where empires whispered, not as a warning, as a force. She had become more than a commander. She was the strategist who outsmarted the Parvac uprising, the peacekeeper who disarmed a civil war with one speech, the first royal to walk among soldiers without bodyguards, and the only Zyran officer to ever win full command of a human fleet squadron by vote. Not inheritance, but those who feared her. Didn't know her, not really. The ones who knew her best remembered something else. That once she was proud, untouchable, blind, and then she met him. Captain Dax Mercer was still on her staff, still wore the same uniform, still walked like a man who didn't need attention. He didn't want medals, he didn't want command. He only stayed for one reason, because she asked him to. One evening, Ilex stood alone on the edge of the Capitol Tower, overlooking the twin suns of Velmara Prime. Her long coat drifted in the wind. A younger officer approached slowly. "Commander Alex," he said nervously. "Counselor Rin has requested your presence. She claims you're the only one who can make the border colonies listen." Alex didn't move right away. Then she asked, "Has Captain Mercer been informed?" The officer blinked. No. We assumed." "Then you assumed wrong." Inside the war chamber, Dax studied charts, not because he had to, because it mattered. When Alex entered, he didn't stand, didn't salute. She didn't expect him to. She never had. "I'm being sent again," she said. He looked up. "Dangerous?" "Always." He nodded once and said nothing, but she waited. Because even now, after all the titles, victories, and honors, she didn't move without him. Not because she was weak, because she remembered the moment she became strong, and it started with the man who never raised his voice, but made her rethink every one of hers. "You coming?" she asked, finally. He stood. "Always." Later, aboard the flagship Resolute, the crew snapped to attention as Alex entered the command deck. The officers watched her move with silent precision. The captains whispered her name with awe, but none of them missed the way she looked toward the man behind her, the only one she didn't command with words, the one she watched for signals. Because he didn't lead with force, he led with presence. As the ship prepared to jump to the border zone, a young ensign asked her quietly, "Commander, is it true that before all of this you once disobeyed him?" Alex smirked. "Once?" The crew chuckled nervously. Then she added, softer now, "And I paid for it, not with punishment, but with the lesson of my life." That night, after the mission briefing, Alex stood beside Dax near the viewing glass. Stars shimmered ahead, and she whispered, "You changed everything." He didn't look at her. "You did that." "No," she said. "I wore armor. You made me take it off piece by piece until I remembered who I was supposed to be." He was quiet, then said, "You didn't obey me. You listened to yourself for the first time." She looked at him, sharp, calm, steady as ever, and for the first time since they met. She stepped 1 foot back and bowed her head, not deep, not ceremonial, but real, from one equal to another. He touched her shoulder, not to stop her, but to let her know. He saw her. Across the galaxy, leaders called her ruthless, her enemies called her terrifying, but only one person ever called her right to her face, and never had to raise his voice to do it. Now she stood before armies, unshaken. But when he spoke, she listened, not because of fear, not because of duty, but because he was the only one who ever showed her that true power was knowing when to stop needing it.